Welcome to Storm Surrey Walk and Talk about the walking. It's raining outside, so I'm going to take the equipment out today. Um, I'm still gutted, because I really did, across two channels, make videos that I knew if I got a payoff, which, as I said, I, I knew that if I put them together and said things subtly around you that you may not pick up on, some of them you would, that I would then be able to go back, take out those pieces of that video, do a narration, and the payoff would have been the big thunderstorm that I couldn't pull myself out of bed to film, which I'm gutted about. I mean, there's many people that may not have seen thunderstorms this year, but if you haven't, it's because you're unlucky. It's literally that they're not very big, but most places, as in most counties, have had them. It's just whether you've had them. And that's perfectly normal for a county to have one, and yet you live in that county and not see nothing. It's totally normal. But a lot of people have seen them, and the point of it being is they saw the big ones. And that was going to be the crescendo. And then when I saw some stuff that's happened since, I thought, no, it wouldn't have been. I would have actually carried that video on probably now to the end of summer. And I am still gutted about losing that. Not getting up that night and filming that. I just couldn't pull myself up. I was so tired. But without that crescendo of the thunderstorm, the things that I said leading up to it, okay, I could put a thunderstorm in its place, but it's not exactly proof of the thunderstorm we had here. So I don't know. It just feel like a cheap knockoff, and it's a real shame because it really does. There's a narrative that leads up to it, and the narrative where you realise that I knew, relatively speaking, all along that it was coming. Yeah, it's frustrating, but the thing I wanted to suggest today is that when I come on here and I say to people about thunderstorms and stuff like that, and I say July tends to be one of the front runners for wettest month of the year. I don't think it's now classed as wet month of the year anymore. I think there's another month, I can't think which it is, that's considered to be wetter. But July is always in the running every year, always in the running for the wettest month of the year. And this month you've seen why. I mean, we've had a heat wave, and the thing about July is it can dump. If any of you seen a flash flood, and a lot of people say they have, but they haven't. If you've seen a flash flood, you'll understand why July can be the wettest month of the year instantly. If you've seen just one flash flood in your life, you'll know. And that is because, I'll give you an example. Anybody knows, well, you don't need to know, but there's a place I live near, relatively near, called Lyndhurst. And it's a place out in the forest. You just got a road that cuts straight through the forest. You've got forest either side. But the point of it is, it would take quite a lot of water to fall to flood any part of this forest, because you've got a lot of obviously a lot of grass and everything else, and things would just fall into puddles if you had a lot of rain. There's parts of the forest that are angled, more where I live, but where that is, it's mostly flat. So really, there's nowhere for the water to go. You wouldn't think so. So you have a flash flood there. It's hard to imagine what would really happen, but except I got to see what happens in a July. And so we're going down this road which cuts through the forest, and at the end of this road there's a cattle grid that leads you back into this little town called Lyndhurst, or a little village called Lyndhurst. And as we were sort of, I don't know, maybe 1,000 yards away from that cattle grid, I'd been watching some storms that had just exploded, and we had a flash flood. And what that was to be absolutely clear, the forest went from ferns and the gauzy stuff and grass and whatever else to what I can only describe as the rapids in seconds. I don't know how that much water could have been held up in the air in the first place. Secondly, I just don't know I don't know how that amount of water is possible to be deposited on the ground that quickly. I know that we got the other side of the cattle grid, which was the only relatively safe place to be, and even that was just a case of stopping the car and hoping for the best. But that was all because that was uphill. But the forest just sat and watched, and while it was raining, the forest wasn't recognisable as a forest. I don't remember seeing any green. All I could see was water running like a river, and I don't mean over a tiny piece of land. I mean over a lot of land. It was just, bear in mind what I said. A single cell thunderstorm is a mile wide at bottom, so it was probably no more than a mile wide. A supercell much bigger, but I don't think this was. I remember it being specifically being single cell, and so for a mile area, the ground was turned into like the rapids, like a running rapids river. And I didn't even know there was an angle in that forest for the water to run one way, but it was running one way, so there obviously was. But you couldn't see the ground. You couldn't see green at all. And then when the rain stopped, it took about, I don't know where that water ran to, by the way, but it took about 10 minutes for you to sort of start seeing basically the forest coming out of the floor and then the water receding into those puddles that we talked about at the beginning. And you start to see these puddles, and then within no time, because of that type of atmosphere, most of the water's gone. But that is a flash flood. Not really heavy rain where you get a little bit of flooding down the end of the road. It is so much water dropping where you are within seconds that you can have a street turn into a river. And anywhere that's prone to flooding is fucked. Yeah, and it's nothing to do with riverbanks or anything else at that moment. That is everything to do with the amount of water deposited by a single cloud. It's incredible when you think about it being a mile wide at bottom. So that is why July is one of the very wettest months, because it doesn't matter if you have a heat wave. 3 weeks of the month, that final week can dump weeks worth of rain in hours. Something stupid you've learnt today?